All right, hello again. I'm pleased to introduce tonight our speaker. He is not a stranger to our summer series. He has spoken with us several times in the past, and excited that he is the one who gets to kick us off this year with our summer series of The Christians Do and Don't. His name is Matt Presley. He was born in Mobile, Alabama, and raised in nearby Chickasaw, Alabama. He's a 1988 graduate of Mobile Christian School and a 1992 graduate of Faulkner University with a degree in biblical studies. He served as a youth minister for 11 years in the states of Alabama and Tennessee, and since 2001, he has owned his own business as the owner of the Matt Presley Auctioneers and conducts auctions of personal business and real property. He is married to his bride, the former Kathy Frazier Baird, and together they have 6 children, our own Hannah, one of them, and 4 grandchildren, and they are members at Creekwood, the Creekwood congregation over in Mobile. So, Brother Presley, we're excited to have you back and ready to hear you come preach the word.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you again. I missed last year, and it was all my fault because I didn't send an email saying in time, and all the slots got filled up. So that was sad for me because I always enjoy coming over here. Now, I'm not going to lie. I believe in telling the truth. I always have. It was instilled in me from the time I was a child. And what I'm about to say is not meant to be a disparaging remark towards my oldest child who is right here. But I understand now more than ever what my dad meant. My dad was blessed with 15 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren before he passed away. And he used to tell me all the time, dead straight in the eye, my dad was the straightest shooter I ever knew. He said, "Son, you don't matter anymore. These grandbabies are what matters." And respectfully to my precious daughter, I love her so much, but boy, I love these grandbabies. I can tell you that right now. Now, I was corrected a few months ago. We actually have 3 born grandchildren who are alive and kicking, and we have another one that's not quite made his appearance yet. Be our first grandson, but one of my old brothers, he's in his 80s. He has. I can't tell you how many grandchildren I told him a few months ago, I got two grandchildren and 2 on the way. He said, "No, sir, you've got 4 grandchildren." He said, "Because Jeremiah was told before you were formed in the womb, I knew you." And I said, "You're right." So that's why I always say we've got 4, and we're excited about a grandson coming. But well, we love these precious granddaughters that we have, and especially Jake and Hannah. And we're honored to be here with you tonight. If you put the math together, I was born in 1970. I know for some of y'all you think I'm just a sprout, and I get that, and I appreciate that. I like to be called a sprout from time to time, but I am a grandpa. But I grew up in the 70s and in the 80s, and now the topic of transformation, I will get to the topic assigned to me. It's part of this idea of transformation. The topic assigned to me was, do not be fashioned to this world. So naturally, my mind went straight to Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. But for contextual purposes, we're going to look at the first 16 verses, primarily focusing on verses 14, 15, and 16. But what I mean by being a child of the 70s, it was a lot different than it is now. Those of y'all alive at that time, if you were in my age bracket, we were little kids, things were different. We never spent a second inside in the summer, not 1 second, except to run in and get a drink of Kool-Aid and get back outside. And my mom and dad were so precious, they let us play in the water hose all day long. It didn't matter. They didn't care about how much the water bill was. We played in the water hose all day long. We drank from the water hose. We played in the water hose, and that's just what we did. We didn't have a swimming pool, so that was our way to stay cool in South Alabama, in the little bitty city of Chickasaw. And also in the 1970s, we didn't have a lot of the media that we have today. We couldn't pull up our phone and watch shows or cartoons or things like that. We had 4 channels, 3, 5, 10, and 42, which was the public television channel at the time. So we didn't get a lot of cartoons during the week. It was Saturday morning. And so to fill our time in during the week, those of y'all in this age bracket or either before or after, some of y'all even a little bit older, remember comic books. Comic books. My two brothers and I, at one point, had some 4,000 comic books. I honestly don't know exactly what happened to all of them. I think my older brother is hoarding them, hoping they're going to be worth millions of dollars one day. And he's an elder at our congregation, by the way, so he's a pretty good guy. But we had comic books, and then those comic books, believe it or not, young guys and girls up here on the front, these Marvel movies you see were not the beginning of the comic books. In fact, one of our favorite shows was this one in 1978. Some of y'all remember this. You've got Dr. Bruce Banner, who got somehow an overdose of gamma rays, and then he gets angry. You remember that? Remember he told the reporter, I always love quoting it, don't make me angry because you won't like me when I get angry. Because when he got angry, he turned into what at that time was the Incredible Hulk, which was Lou Ferrigno dressed in a bunch of green paint, and who was a very muscular bodybuilder at the time. Now, these guys and girls have probably never seen this Incredible Hulk. They've seen the one that's about 20 feet tall and 20 feet wide and full of muscles and that kind of stuff, and that's cool. But we read about these guys in the comic books, and because Dr. Bruce Banner had to go through a transformation, did he not? He was transformed from human into this crazy wild beast. And even before that, way before that, as a child, many of us read the story or the tales of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll, trying to find some way to extend life and make himself stronger, drinks a potion, and instead of becoming a sane individual, he goes wild and becomes a wild man and starts hurting people. But he's very powerful and strong. He transforms from a mild-mannered person to an angry person. And that was before that. But then 1984 came along, guys and girls, and this was the beginning of it. I never watched this cartoon. It wasn't my thing. But I watched similar shows like Voltron and Ultraman and things like that where these robots could transform or become different things. Some might become a dinosaur or a car or a truck or a bulldozer and those kind of things. And even before that, I forgot about the one I should have mentioned. My favorite show growing up was the Super Friends. And for whatever reason, even Kathy and I, even now sometimes we'll look at each other and we'll tap fists and go, Wonder Twin powers, activate. And you remember that? And for whatever reason, they would say, form of a monkey, form of an ice cube, or something like that. It was so weird, the weird things. But Zan and Jaina, the Wonder Twins on Super Friends, they could transform into these crazy things. But with all this make-believe transformation, way before all that craziness or whatever fun stuff to some degree was thought about, God called us to be transformed. And I want to enter into talk about transforming by moving into something that maybe these guys and girls up here have seen. Now, when my kids were little, they loved this movie. I bet Hannah could probably make some quotes from it still, because we watched this movie a lot. I think it came out in the late 90s, and if you haven't seen it, I'm going to give you a short synopsis of the Disney movie, Pixar movie called A Bug's Life. And here it is. Here's the main character. He is the hero of the movie. At first, he's a nut. He's this crazy ant inventor. It's all about a colony of ants who are trying to work together to survive, and they're gathering food up like ants do and protecting one another. But Flick, he wants to figure out a way to harvest food faster and do things differently. And because they've got a problem, they got this guy, Hopper. He's the leader of this bad biker dude type of grasshoppers who fly in about once a year and they steal all the food or most of the food that the ants have gathered. So in the beginning of the movie, they've gathered up their tribute, and Flick has got this contraption on his back, and he somehow knocks all the food that they're supposed to give to Hopper and his gang into the lake below. Uh-oh. Hopper gets there. He's not happy. And his folk, they're not happy because they're not getting anything to eat. So he gives them an ultimatum. When we come back, you better have twice as much food, or we're going to take care of you We're going to exterminate all of you. Well, Flick, being the inventor ant, he has an idea. Let's go find some warriors to fight for us. And these are called the warrior bugs. And I'm fixing to get to the point here. The warrior bugs, and these are supposed to be the strong bugs, the ones that can take care of business. Well, actually, they're not warrior bugs. They're a traveling circus led by P.T. Flea. P.T. Flea. P.T. Flea is the head of the flea circus, and these are all circus bugs. They're all actors. They're not warrior bugs. But nobody knows that except for Flick. But here's the one I want to focus on. Is this sweet-looking guy right here. And I know what the young people are thinking. That has a very strong resemblance to Mr. Matt. I get it. Heimlich, I love the name, by the way. Heimlich is a heavy-duty caterpillar. He's not like the ones we see walking around the ground. Heimlich loves his food, as you can tell in the movie. But he also has this dream. And this is what I want to focus on. Heimlich has this dream in the movie. Like every caterpillar, he wants to become a beautiful butterfly. In fact, he said, "A beautiful butterfly." That's how he talks. He has this accent. He wants to become a beautiful butterfly, which, sorry, spoiler alert, he does kind of become a butterfly. You'll have to watch it and see it. But he wants to become a beautiful butterfly. Now, those of us who went to science class and have any memory of it, very little for me, remember that that's a process called metamorphosis, which is a fancy word for what? Transformation. I think it's always been amazing to me how this little creepy looking bug that crawls on the earth can crawl up a little stick or in just about anywhere, form a cocoon around itself, and then certain time passes and boom, no more caterpillar. It's this beautiful butterfly. Beautiful butterfly. And that's what Heimlich dreamed of. Now, what does that have to do with you and me tonight? Well, I tell you what it has to do with us. All of us, I hope and pray, are striving to be transformed every day. Every day. In Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, Paul writing to the Romans, now consider the context in which Paul is writing. Paul is writing while these Christians in Rome, number one, they're not Jews. They're Gentiles. They have been recently brought to Christ by the powerful message that Jesus died, he was buried, and he rose again on the third day, which Paul reiterated in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 1 through 4, to the Corinthians. This is the gospel. Jesus died, he was buried, he rose again on the third day. And it's the most important thing you'll ever know in your life. And the most important thing that you'll ever have to try to emulate in your life. Not simply when you're baptized into Christ, which is the very spiritual manner in which we die to ourselves. We're buried in a watery grave and we rise to walk in the newness of life. Romans 6, 1 through 4. But Paul goes on to say that's just not just a one-time deal. It's not just, wow, now I'm a Christian, everything's fine, Satan can't touch me. Back when I was baptized 40-something years ago, I really had that thought in my middle school brain. I'm now a Christian, Satan can't touch me, he can't do anything for me. Well, guess what? That's wrong. When you become a Christian, my brothers and sisters, and those who perhaps that are thinking and considering becoming a Christian, that's when Satan gets doubly charged up and really gets after you, because he doesn't want you to remain faithful. He wants you to follow him instead, because nothing makes God sadder than to see a Christian fall away and not follow him, just like Demas did. You remember what Paul said about Demas? That Demas has forsaken me. Why? Because he loved this present world more. But John said, we're not to love the world, remember? 1 John chapter 2. Do not love the world or the things that are in the world. For all that is in the world is not of the Father, but it's of the world. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life are not of the Father, but they are of the world. And we've got to stay away from the things that are in this world. And that's not always easy, because the world literally is at our fingertips today, is it not? Not just for those of us who are adults, but for our children and for our grandchildren. It's right there available. You can just type in a little search, and boom, typically something's going to pop up. And unfortunately, many times more than not, it's something that's probably not very appropriate. And that's why I think Paul, in the climate of this Roman domination, of the Romans being so difficult to deal with, and the Romans really, taking a real hard look and suspecting this newfound church and Christianity that's popped on the scene and it's grown like wildfire, Paul says the following: I urge you, I beg you, some versions say, brothers and sisters, in view of the mercies of God, I beg you, offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God, because this is your true and proper worship. And that whole verse is written in the future tense, where it's not just today, it's not just tomorrow, but it's all of the days of our life. We are to present ourselves a living sacrifice. Now that kind of sounds oxymoronic if you think about it. How can I be living but also be a sacrifice at the same time? Because when I think about sacrifice, I think about something's got to die. Jesus was our atoning sacrifice, and he died on the cross. In the Old Testament, the offerings they made, those animals died. So how are we a living sacrifice? How do we accomplish that? Well, I'm going to get to that in just a second as you're molding it over. Second verse, he says, and here's how you do it. Here's how you do it. Here's how you try to do it. Don't be conformed to the pattern, or don't be fashioned after the pattern of this world, but instead be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test, you'll be able to prove what God's will really is. His good, pleasing, and perfect will. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I've got this all figured out. I do not. I do not. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that these instructions of Paul are easy. They weren't easy for the Romans in the first century. They're not easy for those of us Christians in the 21st century. But they can be accomplished not by our own power and abilities, but by the very power of God. Because it is his power that upon which we receive these incredible blessings. It's his divine power that has given us, the Bible tells us, everything that we need for life and godliness. And we all love Philippians 4, verse 13, that knowing Christ, that we get that strength, this overwhelming, powerful strength from Christ. And we all love Romans chapter 8, where Paul tells the Romans, prior to writing these verses, that we have been made more than conquerors through him who loved us. Not just a conqueror. We just didn't win. We just didn't win the battle royal. We are more than conquerors. We have an overwhelming victory in this life every day when we seek to do his will, his good and perfect will, and thus please God. And I believe firmly that everyone in this room tonight wants to please God. I know it's always difficult and a challenge sometimes, because each one of us are pressed about sometimes and faced with hard things. Hard things. From our health to our livelihood, to our relationships, and so many other things that we could talk about. But if we trust God like he asks us to do, and we trust him with all of our hearts, and we don't lean on our own understanding, and we acknowledge him in all of our ways, he will direct our paths. That's so beautiful. He'll do it for us, just like he did it for our first century brothers and sisters. And I don't know about you. I don't know every person in here in a very detailed way. But I don't think that very many of us, if any, have experienced the type of great persecution that our brothers and sisters living in the first century experienced. Yeah, I've had a door or two slammed in my face trying to give out a Bible tract or set up a Bible study. I've even had people say ugly things to me. But I've never ever thought my life was in danger. I've never ever seen someone actually put to death, which was a common thing in the first century, because simply I said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and I'm going to follow him until I die. I'm reminded of one of the early church fathers, as they're called, Polycarp. Some of you have heard that name. 86 years old. And they had Polycarp tied to a stake, and they were getting ready to set the fire to burn him alive. And they gave him an opportunity. This is true story here, not one of them made up preacher ones. Not that preachers ever make up stories, by the way, I'm just saying. They gave him a chance to renounce Jesus, to renounce his faith. And here's what Polycarp had to say. For 86 years I have served him. How can I fail him now? And they burned him alive at 86 years old because he would not be conformed to this world. Because he allowed Jesus Christ to transform him into something new. See, that's the beautiful thing about becoming a Christian. The old things that used to be our pattern of life are now gone. All those old things are now, behold, all things have become new. Now, if you're like me and you grew up in the church, perhaps that doesn't mean as much to you. But I know a lot of people, and I bet you do too, and you may be one of them. Perhaps you didn't become a Christian until you were in your adult life. Maybe perhaps into your older adult life. And it's sometimes challenging, is it not, to put away the old habits and the way of life that we're accustomed to living in order to follow Jesus. But I believe with all my heart that Jesus can fix it. And the things that you may be struggling with as a new Christian, he can handle. Or whatever it is. If it's an addiction, I think he can handle it. If it's struggling with things you're looking at, either in some kind of written or digital format, I think he can handle it. And we can go on and on and on. But I believe Jesus can handle those things. But you have to be willing to allow yourself to be transformed. Not just in that single moment of becoming a Christian, but every day. I believe that's what I believe this gets to the heart of Jesus when he told his apostles, here's what you got to do to follow me. You got to take up your cross daily and follow me. But before that, he said what? You got to deny yourself. Ooh, that's a tough one, isn't it? You got to deny yourself. Now, you can look at me and see that I do resemble Heimlich the caterpillar, at least in girth. Okay? And I'm struggling. I'm really having a hard time. With this because I like good food. I do. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you I don't. Especially, a little cheesecake, a little brownie, little cookies, and things like that. But sometimes in order to get to a certain goal physically, what do we have to do? You got to deny yourself. Years ago, when I was about this size, I bought a health program. At that time, it was the #1 health program out there. It was called P90X. My son-in-law, Jake, we've laughed about this before because Jake, is really fit and he has that gym and stuff. And I'm glad for him. I really am. But I bought that box. And it came in the mail, and I set it beside my bed, and it sat there for 2 years. And I didn't lose a pound. No, not 1 pound. I'm like, What's the deal? I bought the program. I mean, this guy that's on here, Tony Horton, is selling this thing. In my mind, this is no joke. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I've got an infomercial. And I said, this guy is 10 years older than me. And he looks like somebody carved him out of stone. Surely, let's buy it. No. You know what I had to do? I know this is going to shock you. I had to open the box, take out the instructions, and I actually had to, I hate to tell you this, put it into practice. Put it into practice. Now, Tony Horton's up there doing one-arm pull-ups like this, like that, like that. I couldn't do one. Not one. You know how many I can do right now? Not one. Zero. I'm back. I'm right where I came back. Yeah, I made a full circle because I quit denying myself all the things that I love to eat. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you got to cut it all out. People used to ask me back then, 15, 20 years, whatever it was, how'd you do it? Well, I had to tell them. I hate to tell you, I just quit eating as much and started exercising. My father said, it's easy, son. Put down the spoon. That's what he said. Put down the spoon, and he was right. He was right. But if we do that for ourselves physically, why is it that we do not do that for ourselves spiritually? I don't know about you, but I get so busy during the day, and my Kathy, bless her heart, she's always trying to help me not get overcommitted too much, but I just have a hard time doing it. Somebody calls me and they said, I need some help. I need some help. I need some help. My mother has passed away. We need to get rid of all this stuff immediately. It's hard for me to say no. But you know what happens is that if you're like me, all this stuff comes in, but it's not necessarily bad, but we forget to put the first things first, the main thing. And I seem like I don't have enough time to pick up the Bible and read it. And then I just read it casually, but study it and let it sink in and really find meaning in my life. Or I find myself not praying like I ought to pray. I submit to you tonight, the church has not because it prays not. We as Christians have not because we do not pray enough. I'm not one of those ones that says prayer is powerful, because it's not. But God is powerful, and His power backs up every word that we pray. Because I'm telling you right now, my prayers are pretty pathetic sometimes. They're weak. I find myself, I'm exhausted after a long day, and I lay my head on the pillow, and I try to pray, and boom, I fall asleep before I even get through it. And that's my fault. But see, we serve a powerful God who backs up those words. I've kind of gotten off on a tangent, I'm sorry. But we got to keep God always ahead of us, always thinking about what's going to be best for God. What's going to be best for His kingdom. Now I want to skip down to verses 14 through 18, because this is where I want to spend the bulk of our time. I'm watching the clock. I'm not going to go over, maybe. Bless those who persecute you. I got to these verses because these perhaps are the most difficult instructions, I think, that Paul gives to the Roman brothers and sisters. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty or full of pride, but associate with the lowly. Don't claim to be wiser than you are. And do not, this is a hard one for me, do not repay anyone evil with evil, but repay evil with good. And take thought for what is noble in the sight of all. If it's possible, as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. I told the kids the last weekend we had a kickoff for our youth group, and we went to a lake up in North Alabama, and I told them, I said, I'm going to give you some earth-shattering news here about Mr. Matt. That's what they call me, Mr. Matt. I said, I know you're going to be hard for you to believe this, but this cool old man that sits in front of you was not so cool at one time in his life. I mean, they were totally floored. They were shocked. They were shocked that I have not been this cool, super popular guy my entire life. That's an amen, by the way. In middle school, I got to admit, I had a pretty challenging time. No joke, not made up. For my 13th birthday, I got braces for my birthday. That was what I got. I didn't get a toy. I didn't get a comic book. I got braces. No joke. Hey, happy birthday. Here's some braces. And that's what I got. But you know what? I needed them. Had them for 2 years. But that's what I got. But before that, when I was 8 years old, couldn't see too well, I had to get these glasses right here. And I really thought, guys and girls, I know it's crazy. I thought, man, when I walk into this third grade classroom, every guy and girl is going to think I'm the coolest dude in class because I've got glasses. Yeah, I got these sweet glasses, and if y'all remember, they were the glasses. I actually borrowed them. They took them from the owl from the Tootsie Roll Pop commercial. Some of y'all remember that commercial? You know how many licks? You remember that one? These giant. They were huge. The biggest glasses I've ever seen. I mean, I got some stories about glasses. These right here, you can't see. My two-year-old puppy chewed them the other night, and so they're kind of gnarled. But because I haven't had a chance to go get some new ones. But anyway, I was kind of got my bubble burst. I was not that cool with glasses. Wasn't that cool with glasses and braces. And then on top of that, all the stuff going on with my skin, and got this. I used to have lots of hair, believe it or not, big, giant, crazy hair. It wasn't so good for me. And because of that, I took some very difficult times from people saying things, like they used to, some of y'all probably been there. And so much so, ninth grade, I told the story last weekend. There was a really cool dude. He really was cool. I mean, he really was cool. He was the senior quarterback of our football team. And I was the freshman that year. My voice had just changed, and we had a great chorus director, and I was a bass singer, singing bass, and the football coach had told these guys, you either go and get in the chorus, or I'm going to make you run till you throw up every day. So guess what? They got in the chorus. Well, this guy's name was T. Bruce McKinnon. I mean, you got to be cool to be called T. Bruce, right? And then most people just called him T. Oh, yeah, he was cool. T. And so back in that day, we had songbooks like y'all have. That's what we used in our chapel at Mobile Christian. And I was carrying a big old stack of songbooks, and T. Bruce comes by with his buddies, and he slaps those books out of my hand. Right there on the ground, right in front of the gym. Now, I wasn't about to say anything because he was a big dude, and there was a bunch of them, and I was a scrawny. I'm twice the man I used to be. Let me be honest with you. And so I couldn't say anything. Not that I would have anyway. And I probably shed a few tears. I was kind of that way. I still am. I mean, I probably cried at Bug's life. I'm sure I did. But what I'm trying to get at is that you've got these people in your life who, man, they just drive you crazy. And what do you do with a person like that? Well, I'm going to tell you what you do according to the Word of God. You bless them. You bless them. Bless those who persecute you. Bless those who do harm to you. Bless those, and do not curse. And here's the cool thing, you know what? About T. Bruce. At first he thought the chorus was stupid, but he kind of realized that he was going to have to either buy in or not. And he started standing next to me because I was the only one that knew how to sing it. And believe it or not, this old scrawny freshman and this cool dude with only a letter for a first name became best friends. That's a fact. That is a fact. Now, I'm not saying it's because I didn't curse him. I wasn't about to. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's because the Bible told me not to. I was terrified of him. But maybe, just maybe, because I didn't do what he expected, he saw something different. And he thought, you know what, maybe, just maybe, singing praises to Jesus Christ in this chorus class is not so bad after all. So what does it mean We are commanded, this is what the verse means, guys and girls. We're commanded to speak good upon those who would try to hurt us. It's not just ignoring them. It's not just saying, hey, I'm going to walk away. No, you got to talk good about them. That's what this verse really means if you get to the heart of it. Did not Jesus do that? I believe when he said one of his dying words, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That's speaking good upon them, would you not say? I think it is. We've got to speak good upon those who try to hurt us. Now, you might be thinking, well, how do we do that? Well, you don't. You don't in and of yourselves. But when you humble yourself, remember, that's when God is at his strongest. That is when God is at his greatest. Humble yourselves before the mighty hand of God, and in due time, when the time is just right, he will lift you up. And remember what, in that same chapter that Peter said, God gives grace. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. In other words, God, like a general fighting in an army, that's how he resists the proud. But he gives grace to those who humble himself and seek him first. So we're commanded to do that. That's why Jesus said a long time, many years before that, love your enemies. Do good to those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. Pray for them which spitefully use you and persecute you. Man, can you imagine how that went over with the apostles when they heard that? Or that crowd assembled at the Sermon on the Mount? That probably went over like a lead balloon. They're saying, you've got to be out of your mind. You mean I've got to love and speak good about these centurions who say all kinds of bad things about us, who hurt us, who make us carry their backpacks and stuff? And Jesus said, yeah, that's what you got to do. That's what it means to be a part of this kingdom. But I can only imagine that was a very challenging, daunting task for those Jews assembled on that day. That's why after Jesus finished, so many of them quit following him, because they couldn't accept this teaching. Christians are to actively seek the best for our persecutors. Again, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying I've always done it well. I'm not batting 1,000, I can tell you that. But that's the ideal. The high ideal that God sets for us is that we actively seek the best for our persecutors. Because when we do, that totally goes against the fashion or the conformity of the world. Because we live in a world that says the opposite of the golden rule, does it not? Do unto others before they do unto you, right? That's what this world says. You get them before they get you. But Jesus said, no. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's the golden rule. Just like you want to be treated, that's how you treat others. And I think Jesus summed it up, did he not? When he said the greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. But he said he didn't stop there, did he? Some people say, I wish he would have. I love God, but loving all these other people? Don't want any of that. And sometimes those people are the same people that live in our house, aren't they? They got a bedroom right down the hall. Sometimes those people are the ones that sit on the other end of the pew. And I'm not saying it's easy, but either we believe that with God all things are possible, or we do not. We do not. We either do or we do not. Here's what 1 Corinthians, this is in the King James Version. And labor, working with our own hands, being reviled, we bless. Being persecuted, we suffer it. Being defamed, we entreat. We are made as the filth of the world, and we are the offscouring of all things unto this day. Again, that's very hard teaching for the Corinthians, I'm sure. But there's a lot of hard things that I think are in the Bible, but with God's power and his strength and his grace, we can accomplish them. We can do these things, but not of our own strength. If we're going to rely on ourselves, we're going to fail more than we're going to succeed. But we've got to be like this. We've got to be so different that people take notice. Why do you think that Jesus told his apostles? They'll know. They will know. They won't even have to ask. They will know that you are my disciples. What? If you have love for one another. None of this backbiting. None of this talking behind one another's backs. None of this, just all this stuff that seems so prevalent in the world. No, we're going to treat people the way we like to be treated. We are called upon, we are to call upon God to extend his grace even to those who hate us. Man, is that hard? It's tough. It's tough. But if we expect God's grace, then we've got to be willing to extend a similar measure, the best we can accomplish, of grace to others. Again, I've failed more times than I've succeeded. But by the power of God and in view of his mercies, Romans 12 and verse 1, we can do it. But we got to do it together. We got to do it together as the church that God created and that Jesus built. Love your enemies. Here's what Jesus said in Luke. Do good and lend, and don't expect anything in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High. For he himself is kind to the ungrateful and kind to evil men. Be merciful, just as your Father in heaven is merciful. In the recent months, I'm not going to go into detail. Kathy knows. In the recent months, we've had some problems with some folks that have worked for us. That's all I'm going to say about that. And involving some theft and having to get the law involved and stuff like that and money and those kind of things. Working on some jobs that I've got going on. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you one lie. When it first happened, I was angry. I was mad. Why? Tried to help this young man and he goes and does this. So this sermon is just as much for me as it is for you. I know what I need to do. I need to show mercy. I need to show mercy. I need to show grace. We're almost out of time. So we rejoice with those who rejoice, and we weep with those who weep. And the way we do that is by denying ourselves. We've already talked about that. That's at the very heart of rejoicing and weeping with one another. Whether one member suffers, we all suffer. If one member is honored, all members rejoice with that. Life is not always about me, remember that. But it is about Jesus. Amen? Life's not always about me, but it always is about Jesus. How are you showing Jesus to those in your world? In your world. See, we all have our little world inside this big giant world. Our circle of influence, if you will. How are you showing people in your life by the things you say, by the things you do, by the things you listen to, by those with whom you associate? How are you showing them that it's about Jesus in my life? Paul said, I'm going to skip down. Paul said, everything that I used to have, I consider it garbage, rubbish. It's nothing. But what's important to me is I want to know Christ. I want to know Christ and the power of his rising and participate in his sufferings and become like him in his death. He said, I don't consider myself to have taken hold of it. But one thing I do, forget the things in behind. You know, Paul had a pretty sordid past, did he not? He was a murderer, a blasphemer. But he said, the things in my past, I put it behind me. And now, I love it, I press on. I press on to this high calling that God has given me in Christ Jesus. When we consider God's mercy, our attitudes and our minds should be transformed, because the transformed mind blesses its enemies. The transformed mind empathizes with others in their joys and sorrows, and The transformed mind is most like Jesus. One of my preacher friends that I worked with for 5 years, Alan Eldridge, one of the most godly men. If there's anybody I've ever known personally that's like Barnabas, it's Alan Eldridge. Alan has been preaching for almost 60 years. And you can regularly find Alan spending his days at the hospitals, at the nursing homes, visiting people he doesn't even know. People he's never even heard of. Because that's how much he wants to be like Jesus. But Alan said this one time in a sermon when he and I worked together. Life is short, death is certain, and eternity is forever. And I'll leave you with the final question. Do you want to be like Jesus? Let him transform you. If you're thinking about becoming a Christian, tonight is your night. Oh man, it's tonight. It's not tomorrow, it's right now. Because this is where you can have your sins washed away. You can be transformed to become more like Jesus than you ever thought was possible. And then he will carry you and help you, whether you just become a Christian now or you already are. He'll help you accomplish these things that we have discussed tonight. Can we help you? Let's stand together and sing this song.